Hello there, welcome to another Inner Circle video. My name is Gabriel Ives and I'm from the Amtrol Technical Service Department. Today we're going to be talking about hydronic expansion tanks. So that is our Filtrols, our Xtrols, our Xtrol Pros. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics, but before we jump into that, I would just want to talk about kind of housekeeping, talk about the questions, right? So we'd like to answer as many questions as we can. So we're going to have a 5-minute segment at the end of the live stream. If you'd like to ask a question, you can email it to us at askamtrol@gmail.com, the email on the screen, or you can leave questions in the live chat. And we'll be monitoring that. We'll have a 5-minute break near the end of the live stream, and we'll compile all those questions and we'll answer them to the best of our abilities. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Filtrols, Xtrols, and Xtrol Pros. And so that's kind of our hydronic expansion tank lineup. You'll notice that we're missing a couple that used to be there not too many years ago, and we'll be touching on that as well. But let's go ahead and jump into things. Let's start by talking about why you need an expansion tank. Now I'll kind of go through this relatively fast because I'm hoping that most of you will kind of understand these concepts already. But essentially, because water is a non-compressible fluid, and water expands when heat or energy is introduced into the system, there needs to be a safe location for that expanded water to go. So if you have a certain volume of water at 60 degrees, and it looks like we're having a couple of technical difficulties here. Let's see if that boots right back up.
Plug it back in.
Yeah, I'll give that a try. Oh, looks very good. Okay, fingers crossed. All right, so if you have a certain volume of water at 70 degrees and then that water is then heated up to 180 degrees, that water is going to expand by 2%. That doesn't sound like much, but as I mentioned before, water is an incompressible fluid. So you need to have somewhere for that 2% volume to go. And given different differentials in the temperature and even different static pressures and any number of variables may go into what size expansion tank you're going to need to mitigate that expanded water. So let's talk about the Xtrol specifically. So the Xtrol was actually our first product. It was for boiler systems. And what existed prior to the diaphragm Xtrol was kind of a hodgepodge together product that used air in order to accept the, it looks like our slides haven't quite caught up.
Yeah, I don't know why the thing's giving you a hard time. Unplug it and plug it back in.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and unplug it and plug it back in. We may have to take another minute break here just so we can get our technical difficulties all settled here. So just bear with us. Yeah, it may not like the laptop.
We'll try one more slide, if not, we'll take a minute.
Okay, all right. See if it boots right back up here. Looks like it's good on my end. Let's see. Oh, not quite, but we're getting close. See if I can launch back into it.
Yeah, no, let's take a minute and we'll get this up and going. We'll be right back.
All right, sounds good. All right, let's see if maybe we're a little bit farther along here. Hopefully the technical difficulties have been mitigated. But let's go ahead and jump along here. It's not tracking.
Not moving.
No, it's not moving. All right. Okay, so due to the technical difficulties, we may have to postpone the majority of our presentation today. You can always sign up for additional sittings of our shows. We have another one at 3 o'clock today. We also have 2 sittings in 2 weeks from today. But what we can do is we can at least show where Xtrols are supposed to be installed on a system. We made a video that showcases our Xtrol table. And so we're going to show where an Xtrol should be installed on a system. So that goes for Xtrols, Xtrol Pros, and Filtrols. And hopefully we'll get a better idea of how that installation should look, and maybe give you a little bit of a taste of what the presentation was going to be. And hopefully you can tune in at a different time. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that video, and hopefully you enjoy. 3, 2, 1. Hey there, and we're back. So as we were just talking about in those slides back there, we're going to be showing what the installation location of an Xtrol may look like in the real world. So this is a loop that we constructed to essentially mimic what a typical boiler system is going to look like. So we've got our radiator, so this is going to be our baseboard heating, and then we have our cold water inlet from the domestic line. We have our fill valve, and that fill valve right now looks like it's set to around 25 psi. Our line goes around and into our boiler. The boiler heats up the water, sends it through this circulator, and then back around through the radiator. So this is a very typical system. But what we're going to try to demonstrate today is where we should be installing that Xtrol. So that Xtrol, the installation location is actually very important. Now right now we have our Xtrol Pro installed on the line. This system is not just Xtrol Pro specific. It will work with the regular Xtrol Pro. We're just using that as a good example for how this product could be used. So we've got 2 different locations. You may notice that there are 2 expansion tanks. That's for a reason. We don't want 2 expansion tanks on the line. What we have right here are 2 expansion tanks, 2 air separators on 2 separate locations divided by the circulator. So we've got the suction side of the circulator and we've got the push side of the circulator. And each of these expansion tanks have a ball valve that we can close in order to isolate them from the system, essentially removing it or adding it to the system so we can do some tests. What we want to determine is which side is going to be the better application for the Xtrol. Is it on the suction side or is it on the pushing side? Well, I'm going to let you know it's going to be on the suction side. Suction side is where we want our Xtrols to be during installation. And I'll explain why that is in just a minute. But so if we're visualizing the system and we're thinking about how the water is moving, right? The water's moving in from the domestic line. It's going in through this fill valve. This fill valve is very important, right? So what it does is it regulates the pressure in this hydronic loop. The hydronic loop runs at a significantly lower pressure than your domestic system. And so this fill valve, what it's going to be doing is it's going to be regulating that pressure. Well, what you want is you want to have the pressure in the system stay pretty consistent at your fill valve set point. Well, what we're going to see in a little bit is what if the system pressure, this hydronic loop pressure, drops below the fill valve temporarily. And we'll talk about what that may cause in just a minute. But let's start by looking at a bad installation. So a bad installation would be the expansion tank on the pushing side of the circulator. So why is that an issue? Well, if I were to go ahead and close off this expansion tank, so essentially I'm removing this expansion tank from the system. We only have this expansion tank. So what we have here is now the expansion tank on the pushing side of the circulator. Now, when you have a circulator, you're adding energy into the system and you're essentially, you could say, creating pressure, right? So you're going to have a point of high pressure on the discharge or the pushing side of the circulator. Well, wherever you're creating pressure, you have to take pressure away somehow. So it's taking pressure from one side and pushing it along to the other side. So when you have a pressure increase on this side, you're going to have a pressure decrease on this side. Well, why is that a problem if we lose a few psi on this side? Well, as I talked about before, this fill valve is set to kick on and add more water into the system when the pressure in this system drops. Well, you may notice that if the pressure right here drops, the pressure along this area also drops, and that pressure drop will make it all the way down to the fill valve. So what happens is every time your circulator kicks on and it pushes pressure over to one side of the circulator. You're removing pressure from this side, causing a deficit, causing a low pressure zone. That low pressure zone will activate the fill valve. The fill valve will backfill any additional volume to bring that pressure back up to the set point. Well, the issue is that water that's been added into the system is sitting in this tank now. And so the second that your circulator kicks off and that point of low pressure is alleviated and point of high pressure is alleviated, the water in your expansion tank is now stuck. There's nowhere for that water to go. This is a closed loop system. There's no water for that water to go. So your expansion tank is slowly, on every repetition of this circulator, is slowly adding volume into the tank. And that tank is becoming less and less useful for accepting the expansion of the water from the boiler. So let's demonstrate that real quick. What we're going to look at is we're going to be looking at this gauge right here. And we're going to be seeing what happens when I go ahead and turn on a call for heat in the system. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to turn on a call for heat. Right now we're sitting at about 25 psi. As I turn the heat on, the circulator kicks on, you'll notice that the pressure actually drops quite a bit. Now, depending on the system, depending on the circulator, depending on the pressure, that may actually be an even more noticeable drop, right? And so that drop would definitely be enough to affect the set point of the fill valve. All right, so let's go ahead and turn off that call for water. All right, so you may notice that the pressure goes right back up to 25. It's a very short amount of time that pressure is lost or that deficit is created, only while the circulator is running. So now what we're going to look at is kind of the opposite. We're going to look at how the expansion tank should be installed on the system, and we're going to look back at this this pressure gauge, and we're going to see how the expansion tank can help mitigate that low pressure point in order to prevent the fill valve from turning on and backfilling the system. So instead of isolating this tank, I'm now going to isolate this tank and effectively taking it off of the system. So now we really only have this tank to worry about, right? So we have the expansion tank and the air separator on the suction side of the pump now. So that low pressure point, that point of low pressure, is going to be mitigated by the expansion tank. Now you may have a question, and it's a very good question. What happens to the high pressure zone? So that high pressure zone is no longer being mitigated by an expansion tank. That high pressure zone, you will see the pressure rise on this gauge quite a bit, and we'll talk about that. But one thing to note is that a small rise in pressure on this side of the system is not going to affect the system nearly as much as a loss of pressure on this side near the fill valve. And so if we're choosing the worst of two evils, then this is definitely going to be the better option. So let's go ahead and do this test again. We're going to turn on the circulator, and we're going to be keeping an eye on this gauge right here. Now remember, last time we saw this gauge drop quite a bit. Let's see what happens now when we go ahead and turn on our circulator with the new installation location of our Amtrol. All right, so the circulator just kicked on, and you may not be able to tell because that gauge didn't budge. That gauge stayed exactly right where it was, and that was because the expansion tank mitigated that low pressure zone. So in this case, the fill valve would not have turned back on. However, let's go ahead and look over at the other gauge now. So I'm going to turn off the circulator. Let's look over at this gauge right here. So right now it's at 25 psi, which is kind of our system pressure, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the circulator, and let's see what happens. So you'll notice that we do rise in pressure here, roughly 2 to 3 psi. Now, is that a massive issue? Not really. It's really not an issue to be seeing a small pressure rise on this side of the system. And it may cause some alarm to some people, though you can rest assured that that's not going to cause a big issue. It is far better than having a pressure drop on the other side. So let's go ahead and turn off the system. Hopefully this has demonstrated the installation location benefits, well, the benefits to the system depending on the installation location of your Amtrol expansion tank. So this is going to include the Xtrol Pro, the Filtrol, our regular Xtrol. It's not exclusive to the Xtrol Pro, but hopefully this kind of showcased a couple of the benefits of the installation location, and we'll shoot it back over to the studio. All right, well, hopefully you enjoyed that video. Hopefully it was helpful in instructing you where an Xtrol should be installed on the system. Unfortunately, we weren't able to fix any of the technical difficulties off screen there, so we will not be showing this presentation today. However, we are still going to answer some questions. I know we didn't cover very much material, but if there are any questions that you may have, we're going to have a 3-minute break, and you can leave those in the live chat or email us at askamtrol@gmail.com, and we'll go ahead and review those questions in 3 minutes, and hopefully we'll be able to answer everything you have. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into that 3-minute break, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Hey there, and welcome back. So we did get one question, and it's a pretty good question, so we're just going to jump into that right now. Again, thank you very much for leaving questions. It does really drive our program here, and so let's jump into our first question.
All right, so we have a question from an Inner Circle member that asks, will the full presentation be available at some point?
It will. So unfortunately, as you know, this presentation was not able to continue due to technical difficulties. We will be working through that, hopefully have that fixed. For the 3 p.m. session, there will also be 2 more sessions in 2 weeks. So that would be 2 weeks from today at 11 and 3. And then also at the end of the month, we're going to be posting the better version of this stream. So not this version, one where we actually complete the presentation. We'll be posting that on the Rep Toolbox. and you'll be able to access that at the end of the month. So that answers your question. If you do have any other questions, feel free to reach back out to us. You can visit our website and see all of our contact information. You can give us a call on the number on the screen. Hopefully you were able to enjoy this somewhat, and that you have a good day. So you have a great one.